tonight. We're very happy to have Mandy Sackett, another IEP alum. And we were just talking, and it seems like Mandy was actually in the first graduating class after the CBE had been founded. And so she came from, we're having our 10-year anniversary next spring. So Mandy was here in the very beginning days. So we're glad we're both still working hard on ocean and coastal issues. And Mandy is at the Coastal Commission and is working on a lot of both enforcement policy related stuff, but also climate adaptation, and has a lot of, I think, really nuanced views on the kind of California story and its kind of larger implications for, this world of climate change and adaptation. So Mandy, thanks so much for joining us, and we look forward to your talk.
Thanks. Yeah, so stoked to be here. Finally, we've been trying to coordinate for a couple of years. So happy to chat, and I'll go through some of the stuff I'm working on, and happy to answer questions and all that. So I've actually never shared my screen before, so bear with me. I think it looks like this should be pretty self-explanatory. I should be a Zoom expert by now. How's that look?
Oh, good.
You are the PowerPoint.
So good.
Instinctive.
Okay. So that's it. You guys have good view there?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
perfect.
cool.
Yeah.
Thanks. Okay. So yeah, I'm at the Surfrider Foundation now. I graduated from MISS in 2012. And I know y'all are kind of interested in the career path trajectory. So mine was, I started as a Sea Grant Fellow after graduation for the Ocean Protection Council. Was staff at Coastal Commission for a little while, and now I've been at Surfrider for about 6 years. And I'm working for our headquarters office as a California policy coordinator. So I work on state issues of statewide concern. And I thought I'd start with just a real quick overview on Surfrider. Just to give you some background on kind of where we're coming from. Surfrider is a pretty cool group. We were founded back in the 80s. So it's been, I don't know, what is that, a little over 30 years. Our mission is the protection and enjoyment of the world's ocean waves and beaches through a powerful grassroots activist network. Surfrider is truly grassroots. It's so cool. We've got 82 chapters throughout the country. They're all volunteer run, thousands and thousands of volunteers, kind of from anything from beach cleanups to nerdy, wonky policy issues. We cover a ton of stuff. We've got 20 chapters in California. So my job's kind of linking like statewide policy, working with our chapters at the local level, and it kind of ends up being really cool, powerful sort of force to be reckoned with. I like to think so anyway. And then just real quick, the 5 sort of program areas, how we categorize our work at Surfrider is securing beach access, preserving our coasts, which is kind of where I focus mostly. It's a lot of sea level rise work there, ensuring clean water, protect the oceans, kind of like our offshore oil drilling type campaigns, and then plastic pollution. We've got a couple like plastic pollution focused staff, so I don't do all that much on plastics these days. But what I wanted to hone in on today is my work on sea level rise. It really takes up most of my time. And I spend a majority of my time working on it. So I just thought I'd give a little background on the issue and then kind of go into more depth on how we're tackling it at Surfrider. And I put this quote up there because I just think it's cool. The Ocean Protection Council, which is a part of our state California Natural Resources Agency, is really working hard to sort of connect our state agencies and coordinate the work on ocean protection or on sea level rise, as well as the data and the science, and kind of getting it out there and pushing out how really important of an issue it is. It's a real threat today and a looming threat that will be exacerbated over time to ecosystems, our livelihoods, economy, recreation, the well-being and safety of our coastal communities. A study by the US Geological Survey, I think this was out late 2017 or early 2018, found that with 1 to 2 meters of sea level rise, Southern California will lose up to 70 or 67% of our beaches by 2100. And of course, that'll depend on our greenhouse gas emissions projections, but also how we respond and adapt to sea level rise will play a big sort of part there. And it's just really sad to think about. Beaches are so iconic in California, and losing, 70% of them by 2100 is just, it's tough to grapple with. But it's, something we've got to do. And then I think another really important part of this conversation is in the environmental justice component. So UCLA did this really cool survey. This was out, I think, last year or the year before, and found that 77% of Californians visit the beach at least once per year, and that's regardless of age, residence, ethnic group. So I think the connection there with sea level rise is that as sea levels rises, sort of depending on how we adapt, there might be, big portion of public open space that inland communities, low-income communities rely on for their open space to escape the inland heat. And sort of if our response to sea level rise is just armoring the coast and protect, in order to protect private property at the expense of our public open space and our publicly owned beaches, that's pretty unjust. So we're working to find better solutions. And then I'm sure Jason has spoken to you all about the importance of our coastal economy, and beaches play a big part in that, and our coast. So another USGS report recently found that sea level rise will have 10 times the economic impact as our worst wildfires and earthquakes. So, big implications there. And of course, surfing, we're focused on the surfing impacts. This is a cool graphic. I thought the Surfer's Journal printed an article last year. I should have linked to it, but maybe I'll send it to Rachel or Jason to share at some point. But just kind of on what's at stake with our waves, again, depending on how we adapt, really a lot of our favorite waves could drown as sea levels rise. And so, yeah, I think that's all I wanted to say about that. But we've got some ideas how to avoid that, at least save as much money of our waves as we can. So I wanted to share, we've got this really cool video Surfrider just released with USGS. We're trying to find ways to do more like public awareness and outreach about this issue, because it's a little wonky, as you'll find out with the rest of my talk. But this is kind of cool, and it just came out. So sorry, I'm having trouble with the play button. It's just a minute or two, so I'll play that real quick. Let me know if you can't hear.
From up here, the view has pretty much looked the same for hundreds of years. But the beautiful coastline we're so used to is about to change so much, it'll soon be unrecognizable. In the coming years, the sea level will rise, but how much and by when depends on us. Computer simulations show that 6 feet of sea level rise could happen if we don't reduce greenhouse gas emissions. On top of the coming sea level rise, the impact caused by high tides and storms will be far more dramatic, even with less powerful storms. With rising seas, floodwaters will shrink our shores. We'll see water flow to places never before hit by floods. If you factor in a big coastal storm every 20 to 100 years or so, sea levels will rise above our heads. But there are still many ways we can manage our coast to stop further damage. Many nonprofits, along with state and federal entities, are working with local communities to plan for sea level rise. These combined efforts can protect our coastal communities for generations to come. And if we act quickly, we can save the places that mean the most to us.
And that was Capitola. So kind of cool. But just a neat way to visualize kind of what's going on. We're like always looking for kind of new ways. It's, there's not a ton of awareness throughout the state, I think. I mean, I feel it's in the news a lot, but kind of wrapping our heads around what's to come and what to do about it is tough. So getting kind of more into how Surfrider's addressing it, seawalls tend to be kind of what you initially think of. Well, can't we just put seawalls up? The issue with seawalls is that they protect private property and they destroy the beach. They really destroy the beach. So this is kind of our graphic we made to help visualize that. A lot of times if in like the first photo, maybe there's like a storm event or something and some property gets overtopped or flooded or maybe there's some erosion, and so we kind of knee-jerk responses, put a seawall in there, protect the house. Unfortunately, kind of what happens is, maybe the beach comes back a little bit, but as there's high tide events or storms, that the sediment ends up kind of getting pulled out. The process of sedimentation is disrupted. And it's because as like wave action hits the seawall, it kind of has a reverberation with pretty strong energy back out towards the ocean rather than kind of dissipating and allowing the sediment to settle. So eventually that leads to disappearance of the beach. And there's so many examples of this. San Diego, we work on this all day. I could talk about hundreds of them. Surfers Point in Ventura, Ocean Beach, San Francisco, Capistrano Beach, which is in Dana Point. Here's another close look of one we work on. Surfrider has been working on for years in Goleta Beach, which is just, I hate this photo. It's just gone. Solana Beach, another example of there's a lot of armoring down at the bluff toe to protect this development that's just way too close to the bluff edge. And an already naturally narrow beach basically just disappears when there's, especially at high tides, when there's bluff toe, when there's armoring at the toe of the bluff. So what can we do about it? One example we always point to, it's kind of the token example in California, is Surfers Point in Ventura. So we advocate for nature-based solutions. This is sort of an example of that. Another example would be like increasing setback requirements from beachfront or bluff top, managed retreat of structures. But this here is basically an example of both. They did both managed retreat and some habitat creation or nature-based sort of solution. It took a full-time Surfrider staff person 20 years to get this project implemented. They've been working on it forever. They just finished kind of phase one, and I think it was like 2017. This photo's from 2018. And unfortunately, there's just not a lot of examples where we need to get more, and we need to make it not take 20 years to make it happen. But so here's kind of the story behind. At Surfers Point, there was a bike path that was eroding into the ocean. They tried to put some riprap, you can see here, down to avoid the erosion. It's just a mess. But they pulled out this bike path, pulled out the riprap, and constructed dunes. So on the right there, you can see that's the same area where they put down like a cobble mattress, sand nourishment, built some dunes. Surfrider, our local chapter there, works on maintaining the dune vegetation and weeding it out and stuff. So my work is kind of focused on how do we get more examples like this and make it more financially and politically feasible to do. This was, it took years of convincing the local government to do. It took a ton of state financing. So that kind of brings me to my work at the Coastal Commission, working on planning and permitting decisions. And I know you've heard from Jordan Sanchez a couple weeks ago, so you have a good sort of primer on what the Coastal Commission does. And like I said, I sort of spend a lot of my time fighting for smart planning and permitting decisions at the Coastal Commission. It's really kind of the nexus where these decisions are made. Our beaches in California are public. Part of that's because of the Coastal Act, part of that's because of the public trust doctrine. Wet sand, all wet sand in California is public. So most of the dry sand is, but part of the Coastal Act is that it limits the use of seawalls, and I'll get into that a little bit. Developers are trying to constantly get around it, so we've got a constant battle, and that's why we're there every month. They meet 3 days a month, every month. And the California Coastal Commission, they have really strong sea level rise guidance. This guidance is geared towards local governments and how, you know, they should be planning for sea level rise. And they're trying to update this guidance. It was passed back in 2017, and it's pretty progressive. It calls for, you know, managed retreat, looking at nature-based solutions. But it's also sort of basic. And so the idea is that they've got to flesh it out. And they came up with a plan for residential adaptation guidance, but it just became too politically infeasible to pass. And so they're working now on like kind of stepping back, working more with local governments who had a lot of concerns. Local governments tend to sort of err on the side of siding with their wealthy homeowners who, you know, they don't want to hear about managed retreat, and they don't want to hear about having to move their house or not being able to have a seawall. So kind of where this is at, and I'm kind of bringing it up because it's going to come up at the November Coastal Commission hearing next week. In case anyone's interested in watching, they're going to do an update. What they've done is they've held a workshop with local governments, local government coalition. And they've come up with these shared principles, which are supposed to be like an intermediary between updating, you know, new guidance and not doing anything. So this is kind of a step forward. We have some problems with the shared principles document because it doesn't manage. It talks a lot about seawalls and not a lot about managed retreat. But yeah, if anyone's interested, happy to help you figure out how to log on and watch that. It'll be next Wednesday morning, kind of a little update on where the Coastal Commission is on their sea level rise guidance. So sorry, this part's super wonky. Let me know if this gets just way too boring, but I thought it would be interesting to kind of get into. This slide's terrible, but basically I just wanted to get into a little bit of the nitty gritty here, how sea level rise planning works. So on the left side there, you can see the Coastal Commission is basically what they do is all local governments have to create a local coastal program in California. It has to be certified by the California Coastal Commission. And once it's certified, they take over permitting jurisdiction for their area. Now, the California Coastal Commission is giving grants and incentivizing local governments to address sea level rise and update their local coastal programs with like adaptation plans for sea level rise. So they're supposed to be sort of identifying sea level rise projections in their area and impacts, making adaptation plans and incorporating those into their local coastal programs. And Surfrider is kind of trying to interject and plug in at the local level how we'd like to see them plan for sea level rise. It's hard. It's basically me begging our chapter volunteers to like do something wonky and kind of hard, not just like fun, sexy plastic policy bag bans or whatever. But you know, it's important work, I believe. And so I meant to mention, we have a chapter in Monterey and a chapter in Santa Cruz. If anyone's interested in plugging in, I'm happy to help you, and always looking for people to help with this stuff. So, and then, yeah, sorry, sidebar there. And then on the right of this slide is just side of the permitting process, coastal development permits, which is what CDP stands for, is how kind of now and in the future, local governments are supposed to be basically incorporating sea level rise projections into any new permitting items that might take place. So that could be like literally anything. I mean, if they want to put a new restroom on the beach, or someone's building a bluff top house, like it's all supposed to be looking at sea level rise. And that's just kind of the flow chart of how the Coastal Commission suggests that takes place. So got through that. One more wonky slide here. Yeah, so Coastal Act put into place in 1976. And the idea was that new development is not entitled to seawalls, no shoreline armoring, only existing development. And we argue vehemently that existing means before the Coastal Act went into 1976. So essentially like grandfathering in existing development, and new development is not allowed to have a seawall. That, and in that way we can go kind of preserving our coast, because as existing development is redeveloped, like say a new home is remodeled, like that one that this was in one circled in the photo there, if they're developed beyond 50% of major structural components, they're then considered new, no longer entitled to shoreline armoring. So they either need to set their property back far enough, or they don't get to redevelop because there's not enough space on their property anymore. And that's kind of how we are supposed to slowly be getting at managed retreat in California, so that our beaches can survive and it's just not just the whole armored mess. I think that's all I wanted to say on that. Yeah. So from there, I just thought I'd go over a couple permitting and planning examples that I've worked on over the past few years since I've been at Surfrider. All kind of, again, under review and permitting authority of the Coastal Commission, the California Coastal Commission. So this one was really cool. Strands Beach, which is in Dana Point in Orange County. They were, there's a HOA, Homeowners Association. You can kind of see at the left of up here at the bluff top, there's a number of bluff top houses that were applying to basically rebuild this seawall that would take up this huge footprint here. And they were saying it would be okay, and they'd mitigate for it, and they'd put a sidewalk on top of this. And so who cares if the beach is lost? And we were like, no, no way. It's an interesting one because we were almost poised to support it because the staff recommendation was for approval. So kind of how it works is Coastal Commission staff makes a recommendation. There's a board, there's a commission of 12 appointed members who get to have the final say. It's quasi-judicial in that way. But so staff was recommending a huge fine. What they did was, they've done this a couple times and not ton. It would have been a new precedent at this scale, but they took the square footage of the beach space that this seawall would have taken up, and it would have been, I think, 800 feet long. And they compared that to what the real estate value would have been to the same square footage of area of the bluff top, and basically said that's what the mitigation fee would have had to be for this seawall. So it came to like about $15 million. So you can do a cool project probably for $15 million, like create a cool living shoreline project somewhere else nearby or something like that. But ultimately, Surfrider, we decided to take a stance of just opposing it because this beach is just it's a really special beach. It's a cool little cove, and there's like dolphins. It's a marine protected area. It's good surf. And so, sorry, I just want to make sure I get this story right. So yeah, so we opposed it. Not only that, but we also thought it was just over-engineered. It was oversized, and the mitigation funds, they didn't have a specific like project for them designated. It was just like the county had to set aside this money. But it gets a little weird. It's like, we thought it could have easily been double counted. Like the county could have just used it for a sand nourishment project in Newport Beach, which they would have done anyway. And sand nourishment is going to be a part of, how we adapt to sea level rise, I'm sure, but it tends to just be really short-term solution. It gets washed away pretty quick, and just not ideal. So I think we would have felt better if they hadn't identified like nature-based solution, like, hey, we're going to restore this beach, put in cool cobble and dunes habitat at this beach 5 miles away or something. Then maybe we could have got behind it. But anyway, so we pushed really hard for denial. We, on the kids on the right, we rallied like this group of high schoolers who were all great, like super well articulated. We all went and spoke, you know, everyone for 3 minutes. So we took up an hour or two of the Coastal Commission's time of saying, please deny this thing. And we got it. So it was a really fun, cool win. The kids were stoked. It's cool to have, you know, kids' energy. It's just kind of the power of Surfrider's activist network. It's just, was pretty fun. I think the county's gonna potentially come back or just live with it or come back with a smaller project. We're not sure yet, but that was kind of that. I don't want to take up too much time because I have a lot more to talk about. And so another example I wanted to talk about is at San Onofre State Beach. So this is a state park. It's my home break, so this one was near and dear to me. State Parks manages this beach. It's super cool. You basically park on the beach. It's kind of weird, but there's like a compact area where you park. It's right adjacent to the beach. So you drive down, like in between this carved out part of bluffs. So there's like a pinch point. You drive around the bluffs and then park over here on the beach. It's really cool, special, because you just feel like you're kind of have entered like an alternate universe, and it's just peaceful and the surf's really good, unique area. But so that pinch part, it was back in 2017, had some flooding for a couple of days. It was like in the winter during some storms. And so state parks used the opportunity, knee jerk, applied for an emergency permit and got this seawall. So emergency permits are a loophole I'm going to talk about, but basically if you kind of wait for a disaster, and this tends to be a tactic that a lot of agencies, private developers, everyone kind of knows about it, and you wait for the disaster, and it's a lot easier to get your seawall in. And then once your seawall is in, it's a lot easier to get the Coastal Commission to approve a permanent coastal development permit for you, because it's just the momentum. They're expensive to take out. It's $1 million for them to take it out. You know, it's a state agency, so there's some weird conflict there between state parks and Coastal Commission. Anyway, so they got their emergency permit. They came back for a permanent coastal development permit. We did not fight their permanent coastal development permit too much. Kind of some local politics going on there, but they were granted, it was temporary. They gave them a 5-year permit for this, which is unusual and a step in the right direction for Coastal Commission. Usually it's like indefinite or maybe 20 years. But the cool thing that we got built into the permit was it's a robust surf monitoring program. We've done some of this in the past, but this one is going to be really cool, where we've been working with state parks to design it, and Surfline. So Surfline has put in a camera for us, and they're going to monitor the impacts of the seawall on the surf. So they're going to look at like length of peel, number of riders, like number of days, if there's like a backwash in the surf, that kind of stuff. So it's kind of cool. I don't know. It's just an interesting, like, we knew they were going to get the permit, so we try to get in everything we could. So, and then the other thing that we got out of this was a requirement in the permit. So Coastal Commission is requiring state parks to come back after the 5 years with a long-term management plan for the rest of the beach and this portion of the beach. There's another, like, I don't know, 2,000 feet of beach beyond the seawall that you can see here that's unarmored still, but it's eroding. It's like not in great shape. So they have to come back with a plan, and they have to evaluate living shorelines, all non-armoring alternatives. And so I've been working really hard on trying to get funding for helping state parks look for funding for like a living shoreline project there. But it's just a weird, interesting dynamic. I mean, state parks has not shown a ton of interest in planning for sea level rise, and it's kind of problematic because they manage a pretty large portion of our coast in California. They just kind of have enforcement, like ranger culture, not so much like planning agency. Yeah, and then just to kind of hone in a little bit on this, on the emergency permit loophole there, there's two provisions in the Coastal Act that allow for emergency seawall or emergency permits in general, which allow for emergency seawalls. They're often taken advantage of, like I said. We have a campaign, we're working on trying to get the Coastal Commission, the legislature to address that, either to get a better definition of what an emergency is, or to look at more temporary solutions for emergency, like not allow armoring, but maybe just geotextile kind of softer solutions that are actually temporary. So that's sort of that. Another example I just thought I'd run through real quick was at Gaviota State Beach, not to pick too much on state parks, but just another good kind of recent example. They wanted to rebuild this pier. There's a really cool launch, a boat launch right there. And it's really one of the only ways the public can access Hollister Ranch in Santa Barbara County, which is sort of one of the last few privatized areas of California. And there's really good surf people in the area. And I think people from all over, you know, that's one of the very few boat launches. You can launch your boat at the beach there, but it's tough because the waves are can be really strong. Anyway, so they need to rebuild the boat launch, they need to rebuild the pier, but they wanted to put like a massive seawall under the pier to like prevent any damage from wave uprush. And so we were like, yes, rebuild the pier, we need access, but like they could have used a different material, like a metal grating material for the pier and not have to put all that seawall like armoring down. And you can kind of see here, this is the existing pier. It's a really cool like rocky intertidal habitat that they would have been putting like, I mean, all well into the waterway. I think it was like 2,000 square feet of riprap rock armoring. And this is a marine protected area. So it's part of the state's network of marine protected areas. So it's just cool, important habitat. It's, you know, there's indigenous and tribal resources here that would have been impacted, and it was easily avoidable because they could have just, you know, gotten a small budget increase for different material besides wood. And it would have blocked access to the north. Here is another really cool part of the beach and like there's really cool Monterey Shale like bluff formations. And so we fought it and we won again, which was pretty fun. They just denied they didn't deny the pier rebuild, but they denied the seawall portion of it, which is what we were asking for. Unfortunately, State Parks has not come forward with a new project yet. So you can kind of see sometimes there's policy unintended consequences. State Parks is now digging their heels in. Where am I? Yeah, so I think that's it. And then I just thought I'd mention there are, I have to sneeze. Sorry, there are protections under the Coastal Act for marine protected areas. So just an interesting intersection there. But that was one of the policies under the Coastal Act 30230 that we kind of relied on to make our case. And then, let's see, where am I? Okay, yeah. Oh, and then one other example I just wanted to mention real quick is Capistrano Beach. This is one that, again, that I'm working on that's coming up at the Coastal Commission next week. So that was the only reason I wanted to mention it. They haven't decided, but it's an example of where emergency permits gone awry. They've got emergency permits to put these geotextile bags in a long time ago, like 2 years ago. They're like eroding plastic into the beach. Also, you can't see in the photo here, sorry, but there's like a ton of emergency permit riprap seawall, like 600 or 800 feet of it. And now they're applying to have it like all permanently reinstated for 5 or 10 years. So that we're going to be fighting that next week. We want them to take it all out, build a cool living shoreline project. That's what we'll be advocating for. That's next Thursday. So again, if anyone's interested, hit me up. I'll help you plug in. And I'm just going to do a quick time check. Sorry, I don't have my, okay, I think we're okay, right? So I'll run through a few planning examples. So this is kind of gets back to the local coastal program updates for sea level rise. Not doing quite as hot as our permitting examples. It's hard, it's difficult. We have great guidance, like I mentioned, the 2015 sea level rise guidance document, but as far as actually getting that guidance into local government plans has been challenging because, like I said, they're so focused on, representing their wealthy homeowners or, beachfront homeowners who have an interest in protecting their property and wanting seawalls and not wanting, any type of retreat mentioned in any part of the plan. So it's really challenging. There have been only a few, it's been a multi-year process of getting these updates done, but there's been only a few that have actually kind of come before the Coastal Commission for certification. They're all kind of still in the local review process. But one cool example, I do have one positive example to point to, is at Ocean Beach in San Francisco. They passed last year the West Cliff Drive Management Plan. And this photo just kind of shows there's just a ton of riprap at OB. I mean, it's a mess, and just rebar, it's really bad. But they made a plan to take all that out and to realign the Great Highway. So it's managed retreat, plus there's talk of, doing some dunes. It's all, it's in the plan stage, so it's not really close to implementation, but they do have a good plan for at least the West Cliff Drive portion of Ocean Beach in San Francisco. And our San Francisco chapter worked really hard on that for years to get the plan in place. Another one I thought y'all might be interested in the Monterey Bay area. Oops, let me make sure. Oh, shoot. Okay. Is Santa Cruz County. So the county just 3 weeks ago, approved their local coastal program for sea level rise. So now it'll go to the Coastal Commission for review. Surfrider commented on it a few times. It's been taken a few years for the local review process with some really major concerns. So the county LCP includes a number of coastal areas. One is the Opal Cliffs Drive, which is city jurisdiction, but it's a special district, so it falls under the county. And then some of the North and South County beaches. But one of the big problematic areas is Opal Cliffs Drive. They carved out an exemption for Opal Cliffs Drive that any development, new development, redevelopment, you name it, is allowed to have a seawall because they're special. It's unprecedented. There's nowhere in California, that has that type of policy. And it goes against the basic premise of the Coastal Act, of that policy that I just talked about, where new and existing armoring. And, it's a good example of local government being under a ton of pressure from their residents, and they passed the problem on to the Coastal Commission. So we did fight as hard as we could. It's just, it's just a couple of our local chapter folks going to these meetings, and there's hundreds of homeowners lined up going, we need to protect our houses from sea level rise. So it's a tough fight. It's something I grapple with every day. How do I get, there's a lot of issues, Surfrider, we can rally tens, hundreds of people to a meeting, no prob. But for some reason, sea level rise just does not get everyone super excited, which baffles me. I find it exciting. But we do have, some really great, Sam Blakesley is an alum too, has been helping me on that one. Allie's our chapter chair, but could use some more folks. If anyone's interested, let me know. But it tends to be a really similar story we're finding up and down the coast. The city of Del Mar in San Diego, basically just told the Coastal Commission, if you make us put the word managed retreat into our local coastal program, we're just not going to do it. We're done. They just threw up their hands. So, it's a little scary and it's a bad precedent. Del Mar was one of the first local governments that brought their LCP forward to the Coastal Commission. So we're hoping that's not the, the way this goes, because we really have a window here to get good plans in place before sea levels rise too much and our whole coast is walled off. And then I deleted the slide on accident, but I also wanted to mention real quick Pacific Grove just passed. They're one of the few local governments that have passed their LCP update. They got some really cool, good protections for Asilomar dunes, which are pretty progressive. But they got a policy in there that we fought and we didn't win, but it allows for indiscriminate armoring of the coastal trail. There's a cool coastal trail, that like goes all along the cool rocky shoreline there. They can armor it, like just no questions asked. And it's a problem because it's part of the California Coastal Trail, and the California Coastal Trail is supposed to go along. The idea is to get it along the whole the entire state. but and then if we allow indiscriminate armoring of the coastal trail, that means the whole state would just be, the whole coast could just be armored. Anyway, we couldn't get it out. I don't know why. We have a pretty progressive coastal group of commissioners right now. The commissioners are all appointed by the California Governor's Office, Senate, Pro Tem, and the Assembly all get 4 appointments. So it's 12 people, and it's really progressive right now. But it kind of waxes and wanes as far as how progressive it is. But anyway, that was just another example. I just had some sort of final thoughts to share. I think we really do need more tools to deal with this, more public awareness and interest, and more voices, for saving public resources. The opposition, real estate groups, developers, homeowner groups are organized and well-funded and all fighting hard to have their seawalls in California. And we've got to figure out how to rally the troops and get more public voices that we need to protect our public beaches. It's so important. So we're working on it, but open to ideas if you have any. And also just another thought was just, I think we really need more good retreat examples, nature-based adaptation examples to point to show that it works so that we can advocate for them. And of course, more funding as always, and political will. And then finally, just a plug, every month I write a report of the Coastal Commission meetings on this website at coastal.org. And we also score the commissioners every year on how they've voted. So we give them a report card. And that's all I've got. Happy to answer questions. Thank you for hanging in with me and listening. Appreciate the time.
Thanks a lot, Mandy. That was great. I didn't know about that Opal Cliffs project. I'm gonna have to look into that because I surf over there a lot. So gotta check that out. Rachel, do you want to help moderate the Q&A, or how do you?
Yeah, sure. So far we haven't had anyone put in a question, but I'll keep an eye on it.
Okay, so maybe if everyone could just kind of turn their screens on it so we can kind of be have that going, and then you can either put your question in the chat, and then Rachel will just call on you. I think that's probably the easiest way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Indicate that you want to talk.
Yeah, now, good job, Student Suisse. Now we have some people that are saying they want to ask a question. Let me allow you to unmute yourself. Annie, you're the first one.
Hi, Mandy. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us. I've heard a lot about you from Trent at Save the Waves Coalition. I've been working with them a bit, and so I've heard a lot about this work. And I was talking with someone at Opal Cliffs, and I don't know if these are related, but they were talking about, this was about a year ago or a little less, about upcoming policies, which I think is what you're talking about. And they mentioned that the pushback from the community on that specific street was around preserving the bike path since it's such a like a common bike and walking and running area. So I'm just curious, like, if that has been some of the pushback that you're receiving, or if I'm totally off.
Yeah, for sure. I think that once you get, I have to look back for sure, but I think that once you get like north of 41st is, I don't know, I don't think it's still that special district in Opal Cliffs, or is that part of it? But I mean, either way, it is an issue that we grapple with all the time. I mean, I think it's kind of speaks to also the Pacific Grove issue. Like, do we armor our coastal trails? You know, the Coastal Commission also has very strong policies to protect public access. And you could argue, you know, there are people who can't get down to the beach and walk on the beach, and they need a coastal trail in order to access the beach, and totally sympathetic to that. You know, it's case by case for us, but typically we err on the side of, you know, these trails need to be somehow relocated and rerouted inland wherever possible, because we shouldn't sacrifice our coast and access at the coast and our public trust for access along and near the coast. It's just one of those tough, you know, calls we've had to make. But you can see where it gets tough, like the bike path up, you know, along 38 down there in Santa Cruz. There's not really space for it to migrate inland.
Yeah.
But, you know, so I still don't think that means we should allow for indiscriminate, no questions asked armoring there. You know, I gotta believe there's more creative solutions. You know, is there some type of cool nourishment cobble project at the base of the cliffs? I don't know. I'm not a geologist, but I just, you know, I think there's more creative solutions we can get to.
Okay, Natasha, you are up.
Hi, thank you for coming in to speak to us. I had a question about you talked earlier in the presentation about collaboration between different actors, and I just wondered how much you talk with and share your information with emergency managers, both state and federal and like FEMA, and whether there's a lot of collaboration between you guys and them.
Yeah, good question. On FEMA, we have a staff person. She's called her Stephanie Sekish Quinn. She's called her Coastal Preservation Manager. She works on these issues nationwide. She's our FEMA lead. So I'm like totally, I don't know about FEMA stuff. So sorry. I'm trying to get better. I actually just have started working on getting up to speed. The city of San Diego is updating their local coastal program right now for FEMA for new FEMA flood maps. One of the issues is that the FEMA's recommended flood maps are based on past flooding events and not on future sea level rise projections. So, and that is depends on what type of insurance you would need to build wherever, you know, if you're within their recognized flood area. And so that does have an impact, but I think it's a little more indirect than sort of direct permitting, how the Coastal Commission works. So it's like, I'm so narrowly focused. I wish I had more answers for you, but it's somewhere I need to increase my knowledge.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I'm just waiting to see the next question. So I don't have does any other student have a question here? Great, Ellie, go for it.
This is just a very practical question. You mentioned you would be happy to get us involved and get us information on the Coastal Commission. How do I get you my information? Can I email you, or because I'm happy to go to meetings and harass people on behalf of Managed Retreat, and yeah, I'm ready to be plugged in.
Cool. Yeah, totally. I work with students a lot. I have a student from UCI who's doing like some credit projects for us. She's a law student, but I'm always helping people like testify at the Coastal Commission meetings and stuff. And I'm totally happy to help anyone who's interested in getting that kind of experience, like walk you through it. I mean, I needed a little hand holding at first because now the meetings are over Zoom, so it's not such a big deal. But when they're in person, you're like, you got to walk up to the podium. There's a panel of like 12 intimidating people. It's tough. But yeah, totally happy to help you all plug in with our chapters. I mean, our chapters, if you just Google them, it's like Monterey Surfrider, and you can see the issues that they work on. Monterey, our chapter's fairly small or smaller, and they've got like 2 folks who are really focused on policy work. But our chapters are struggling a little bit with the COVID stuff and not being able to meet in person. So I think some new blood would be awesome. And yeah, same thing in Santa Cruz. If you pull up their website, you can kind of see the issues they're focused on. But then the way our chapters work is like, if anyone's has an issue they want to work on, it's kind of like, it's grassroots, right? You can bring your idea and like, power to you. Like you're a Surfrider person working on that issue, and you kind of just have to take the ownership and leadership. Often is kind of how it goes. But yeah, I'll share my email address. I'll pop it into the chat box, and feel free to get it from Rachel or Jason as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great, because if we can bring, like you said, if people can show up at Coastal Commission meetings, and like we just defeated a decel plan for now,
Yeah.
just tons of people involved in that. Like I feel like we can mobilize, especially it seems like if there's something we're against, maybe against a seawall, we can be for these other things. So
totally. And I mean, there's myself and there's one other state level policy staff at Surfrider, and we go to every single meeting every month. It's really almost a month-long process to prepare for the meetings. Agendas come out, we go through them. There's typically 100 or so items. There's maybe 5 to 10 that we comment on. So there's always cool stuff happening, but it's just a process. And it's like they hear from us, the same people, every month. It's so impactful if we can bring like, hey, here's students, or here's local voices. It's way more powerful for them to hear from a diversity of voices. And I think it's good good experience.
looks like Anthony Ciani, if you want to unmute yourself and ask your question, or I'm happy to read that for you if you prefer.
Oh, hey, Anthony, how are you? Yeah, Anthony and I worked on a seawall. This was kind of before this LCP update, but the city, I guess it was, applied for a seawall to armor the coastal trail, and they got it. We lost, but we did get a condition that required them to prepare this shoreline management plan that will look at how they can like avoid hard armoring and relocating the trail for the future.
That's great. I think that's, I don't see Anthony there, but I think that's exactly what he wanted to raise. So that's perfect.
Yeah, it was, you can kind of see how though it's like there's these permitting decisions that are going forward before we have like our plans in place for sea level rise. So we're trying to get these like quasi plans in place, and it's just like, I don't know if it's all happening fast enough to avoid the worst impacts, but anyway.
That's true, so many things. Inga, do you want to ask a question? Inga Lauritsen? Let's see, she does not seem to be there, but her question is Surfrider aware of the huge ATC hotel project in Pacific Grove in the DEIR stage, which would remove tons of granite bedrock for an underground parking garage right across from Hopkins Marine Station? I was not aware of that. Are you aware of that, Mandy, as Surfrider?
Yeah, I've heard of it. I think that our chapter is at least following it, but it hasn't risen to the like coastal commission level, which is usually kind of when I get involved. But I am happy to connect you with Jimena, who's runs our Monterey chapter, or Tony. I'm sure they have more information.
And that's all the questions I have at the moment. I think we're just about at time.
Yeah, we're kind of right a few minutes before 7, so I think it's good transition. Well, Mandy, thanks so much. I hope you get back to the coast soon. I'm sure you're missing the nice fall weather there in Ohio, but good to be with family. And yeah, I'm sure a bunch of our students will follow up with you because people are looking for local projects to get involved with. And I'm going to follow up on the Opal Cliffs as well.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, so glad to be here. Thanks everyone for your time and for inviting me. Stoked to share.
Yeah, that was really great. I've learned a lot, and I'm like everybody else, I'm happy to mobilize. You need us to mobilize.
Excellent.
Great.
Yeah.
Awesome.
All right, we'll be in touch.
All right, everybody, have a great rest of the evening. Take care.